Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and even good midnight to those people in Japan as well. I can't believe you're still up, staying up for this as well. Welcome to Scaled Agile Meetup. It's a global event and part of the Agile 20 Reflect Festival as well. First of all, this is a community-led initiative creating a grassroots-led festival of Agile, marking the 20th anniversary of the Agile Manifesto. This festival invites all Agilists of every background to create events that candidly explore this Agile phenomenon that we've all helped to create over the last 20 years. Over 600 events have been arranged for the month of February. Through this festival, we are enabling reflections, understanding, visualizations, learning, recording, archiving, and energizing, we hope, the next generation. Perhaps even rebuilding the broken bits whilst we candidly and convivially debate and celebrate as well. This whole event has only been possible by a number of global volunteers from literally all around the world, which is amazing because it was just one man's idea back last year. And we ought to recognize that without the inspiration, the enthusiasm of Scott Sedgwick, this would never have happened. This festival also wants to undertake social marketing to reach people new to Agile, tools and platforms to allow global free participation. Please feel free to donate. Our festival is dedicated to bringing people together from all over the world, so everyone has an enjoyable experience, regardless of gender, gender identity, expression, age, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, race, religion, or technology choices. We do not tolerate any harassment with this festival in any form. This is a community event, and we expect the participants to adhere to community guidelines. If there's something that does not align with your expectations, please bring it to us before you take it to social media. In the spirit of community collaboration, we ask that you bring any conflicts to the attention of the organizers in a way that benefits the health of the community. The festival is already open. It's been running for 10 days. There is already a very diverse range of subjects and events. Check out the website to see if anything you want to join later this month as well. Etienne, do you want to say a few words about our wonderful community?
Yes, thank you, Darren. I would like to thank all the meetups organizers around the world that accepted to co-market this event. So Nuremberg, Montreal, Paris, Madrid, Pittsburgh, London, of course, Austria, Boston, Ottawa, Berlin, and Wiesbaden. And thank you also for the Safe Around the World meetup, where we can all subscribe the meetup of all the cities around the world.
And it's amazing what we can achieve when we bring community together. I think we had registrations, over 1,500 registrations. We're already up to over 400 people online already, which is amazing as well. Hello, my name's Darren Wilmshurst. I was first introduced SAFE back in 2013. I was working with a client in the UK, and they started talking about this bloke called Dean Leffingwell. Never heard of him. So I went and read his book. And I read his book when I was on holiday in Mallorca as well, sitting on a beach reading the Agile software requirements. I got a lot of strange looks from people watching me read this book on the beach as well. Later that year, coincidentally, Dean came over to the UK and ran an implementing SAFE course in October 2013. And there I was on that course with Dean almost 8 years ago. I'd just like to say that the years have been much kinder to Dean over those 8 years than they have been to me as well. So I started my journey almost 8 years ago. Etienne, what about you?
Yeah, I did the implementing SAFE in 2015 in Vienna with Dean Leffingwell. And another co-trainer, I don't remember his name, sorry, Michael Stump, yeah, in Vienna. And I will always remember this training. That was great. So thank you, Dean, and let's continue.
Without further ado, it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce somebody I guess that is well known to many of you, an author, an entrepreneur, a methodologist, and currently serving as chief methodologist at Scared Out of Link, which he co-founded in 2011. Everyone, it's Dean Leffingwell.
Thanks, Etienne and Darren, for having me here. And thank you very much for the code of conduct for a couple reasons. Number one, I couldn't appreciate more the code of conduct that gauges meetings like this and keeps us all kind of honorable and speaking well of the things that are good and speaking critically as necessary of the things we don't agree with. Also, the code of conduct specifically has no age discrimination in it, Darren. So once I saw that, I said, okay, I can probably do my talk. So thanks for having me here and thanks for asking. Darren pinged me a couple months ago and he said, would you like to talk on the impact of the Agile Manifesto in your life? And the answer is absolutely. Plus, as you know, you don't say no to Darren or Etienne either way. So consequently, I was on the hook for that. So it caused me to reflect. And the nice thing is I really had some time to work on this. This wasn't I need to present next week. I could go back and say, how did the manifesto affect my life? What role did it play? Where was I when it happened? You know, like when Kennedy was shot, you remember where you were, and then where do we go from here? So I named this kind of tongue in cheek, pre-Waterfall. There was pre-Waterfall. I remember it. I'm not sure if the rest of you do or not. Waterfall, for sure, I lived that life. Rational Unified Process, I helped kind of direct that life. Agile with an exclamation mark, safe, lean, and Dean. And to me, they're all a jumble that I've had to tease apart and put together the story for what people come up and ask me. They said, how did you create safe? I integrated a life's worth of experiences and occasionally I stopped and wrote things down. And that's how I created safe. Like many of you, I started out with as an engineer. And I always wanted to be an engineer. I coach young people, I don't know how regularly, but off and on. And they come and say, you know, what should I be when I grow up? And it's really hard because I don't know what they should be when they grow up. But what I knew is I always wanted to be an engineer. There was never a moment in my life that I can recall that I didn't want to be an engineer. Now, I'm not going to play this video, but I'm going to tell you to go watch it after this session and watch the knack, because this is what it's like to be born as an engineer. And here Dilbert has the knack, and he has a tremendous intuition for things, you know, physical, mechanical, electronic, and software. And as the punchline goes, utter social ineptitude. So I'm not playing it here. It's pretty funny. It's really hard to kind of do this kind of distributed broadband use, but I'm going to leave that for you as a takeaway. It's the only assignment you have after this, and you'll definitely enjoy it. It's only 2 minutes long. What does it mean when you have the knack when you're a kid? And in 1959, you're sitting in school, probably 4th grade, and on this little black and white TV, there's this breaking news about Sputnik. The Russians had launched a satellite. That was the first satellite that ever went up into space, and it wasn't ours. And that triggered real introspection on the part of the United States of America that says, what if the world is space? What if we're going to be in space? What if weaponry and communications, et cetera, are in space? And what if we're not there? And everybody started to worry about their future. And they said, if space is the race, if space is the place, what role are we going to play in that as a nation, as an individual? And that evolved. Folks like John Kennedy, early on in his presidency in about 1964, said, we're going to go to the moon. We're going to put a man on the moon. We're going to put people on Mars. And I believe that. So at my early age, I thought that's where the action is going to be. We're going to leave this planet. We're going to colonize space. It's going to be amazing. And I want to be part of that. More than anything, I want to be part of that. So as an engineer, I said, I can play a role in this. I can participate. I can help us. I can help humanity. I can help our country. I can help everyone if we can kind of master this thing called space. Now, fast forward 40, 50 years, things look a little bit differently. Well, of course, what did I do at that point then? I said, okay, I want to go to space. I want to design the rocket ships that go to space. I want to be part of this brave new world, this kind of next generation. So I got a degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Illinois. Great background, great school. Degree in aerospace engineering, went out and go into the market, went into enter the market, and right in the middle of the time when that space race kind of disappeared. It turns out we put a man on the moon, and then there was no second act. Then the 60s hit, and you can see a lot of things here. You can see John Kennedy. You can see me in the upper right corner with my daughter Marcy in Boulder, Colorado. The 60s was good for some of us and bad for some of us. I can't even say whether it's good or bad for me, but certainly a part of my life. We moved on from the 60s. But didn't want to be in aerospace engineering anymore because it didn't look like the bloom was on the rose. People are actually laying people off from all the big companies. So I decided I wanted to continue my work in bioengineering. And the reason is that as we were trying to understand the way space travel would work, we had to understand the physiological effects, the biological effects on people that were in space. So with my eyes still on that prize, I went to school and got a master's degree in biomedical engineering so that we could start hooking computers to people and really understanding their health and welfare. And that really launched a different career over time for sure. So I became a programmer, pre-Agile. Behind me is one of the first data general computers ever shipped. It shipped to the University of Colorado. It came in a box. There was no software in it, literally. We had to toggle in the bootstrap the loader using the hex keys there, and then we could write code. I still type terribly because I learned to type on a teletype, so I like bust keyboards, bang, 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 and people can't stand to hear me type. And I started my career as a developer. And the fascination that I discovered there was that this was a different world entirely, right? I just spent years, 4, 5, 6, 7 years studying essentially the laws of physics, mechanics and biomechanics. And when we got to computers, the laws of physics went away. We could bring down a system, not with a single byte or a single line of code, with a single bit. So that was fascinating. I also started asking myself the question, where's the engineering in this process? And started to think about software engineering as a discipline. And some could argue that it is or isn't a discipline, but that's been my consuming passion really throughout my career is how do we put real engineering in software and yet still have it be fun? And I did that for a number of years. I developed microprocessor programs and various kind of mini computer programs. We hooked up mini computers to patients in hospitals. We did EKG monitoring. We discovered that we could reliably detect arrhythmias in the electrocardiogram much quicker than anybody else could. You didn't have to stand there and watch the tape. We could record overnight and find out that this patient really did have arrhythmias and not have to go back through 8 or 10 hours of tape to figure out if that happened or not. And that was a fun career. But I started to think about this is a pretty big deal, this software development process. And I wonder where this is going to go and what role I can play with it. So at the early age of 27, I founded my first company. Now, a lot of people have come to me over my career and said, you know, how could I become a CEO? It turns out it's really easy. For about $250, you can form a company, you can be a CEO tomorrow. And that's basically what I did. I borrowed the money to do that. But I thought this computer programming thing is going to be big. And I think there are going to be people that need to do this. In this case, the Denver Water Board, we computerized the Denver Water Board and made water increase the efficiency with which we use the rare resource called water. We're in the Rocky Mountain West. It's almost a desert here. So even then there was like a significant humanity mission associated with, wow, water is really precious. And I wonder if we could use computers to improve on that. And the answer is we could. So I started programming. There was no methods. There were no practices. I don't remember any guidelines. There was a little bit of work from Ed Jordan, who actually became a friend of mine, in structured analysis, data flow diagramming, because the computer was data in, data out. That's really all a computer does. And the perspective that we took on that was, let's think about the data and manage the data. Now that was way before OO, but that was what we had. We did data flow diagrams and started to understand how we're going to convert one form of data to another form of data. The company grew fairly successfully over the years. And we had the need to start building prototypes for our customers. So when we were building devices, electronic devices, we'd build them in the lab and you'd push them to manufacturing, and of course they didn't work. the way to make them work is you have to do the prototyping, and you have to have basically pilot laboratories to be able to do that. So I went and bought a company. We bought a company that was a manufacturing concern, electronics manufacturing, electromechanical assembly and testing. And they were working with various companies in the area like NBI and Lockheed Martin and people like that to build systems. Well, as soon as we did that, of course, we brought our view of, kind of white collar work and real benefits and real PTO and real maternity leave and real insurance to the subcontract manufacturing business, and immediately took it from mildly profitable to very unprofitable. So under my watch, we acquired this company, which was doing okay, and turned it into a loss. We couldn't sustain that loss. So as the CEO of this company, I had promoted the acquisition. It was my responsibility. I was the one that, lobbied the board to do this. And all of a sudden we started being in a world of hurt. I was in a world of hurt too. I didn't know anything about manufacturing. I knew a little bit about computer engineering, computer software development. I knew nothing about manufacturing. I was a systems thinker. My degrees were in systems engineering, and I needed a theory of operation. So over the weekends, and as I watched us drain our lifeblood through the manufacturing division, I decided I need to be good at this, because I didn't have anybody that I knew that could do it. And if I didn't, and as a CEO, I felt if I wasn't competent in the domain that we were working in, then we would likely fail as a business. So I found a theory of operation from Eli Goldratt and The Goal. And in 1986, I had the great good fortune to find and read The Goal, which is a fun read, by the way. Now, this book is historic. This book will not survive the woke movement. Okay, there's definitely some aspects of this book that you would not socialize today. But he described the theory of constraints, which he used in a manufacturing environment. So I went to his class, I took his class, and I started studying. And I said, this is a theory of operation. Just like I was looking for a theory of operation for software development, I needed a theory of operation for manufacturing. So I took on the theory of constraints. I started studying the work of Toyota, Likert, Taiichi Ohno, et cetera. And I came up with my interpretation of lean manufacturing Dean. And we were able to successfully turn that business around, the manufacturing business, and it became absolutely material to our success. But we did it with a theory of operation. We did it with a way of working. We did it with a set of principles focused on things like just-in-time, tech time, touch time for process, pull, standard way of working, Kaizen, continuous improvement, 5 Whys, the whole quality movement was in there as well. So I became a super fan of Lean because it really kind of saved our bacon. It made the company be, I think it saved us. I think it's fair to say that Lean saved the business in such a way that we're able to go on to do better things. Now, I didn't start the business to be in manufacturing. We were manufacturing the systems that we designed for people, mostly biomedical instruments, all kinds of things, systems for the Denver Water Board. We'll talk systems for adventure rides. We built the first microprocessor-based ventilator ever approved by the FDA for home use. And how did we did that? Well, we did it because we were guided by what we all know now is a misfire. In 1973, Winston Royce put out his treatise on software development. And in that book, he described this little waterfall model: requirements, design, coding, test, and maintenance. Now, if you read that article, which I've done, the conclusion of the book, or the conclusion of the white paper is this does not work. Now, to the defense of those that misinterpreted it, he then proposed a series of fast feedback loops and a bunch of arcs and curves and protractor-based drawings that were really, really hard to follow. But the conclusion from his work, and I worked with Walker Royce at Rational, who was constantly describing the fact that his dad said, don't do this, created a very simple model for those that needed to understand how we worked. So when we're working in a governance model, developing software for others, are we going to do let's just start coding? I know, let's test first. That was ridiculous. Test what first? There's no code to test. Let's just code against no design. Maybe the design will emerge. And what's more, what should the design conform to? Requirements. So it's very easy to look at this model and say that can't possibly work. It's also really easy to look at this model and say, well, give me a break. Are you going to code without any requirements? What if you're building the wrong thing? Are you building an infusion pump or a electrosurgical device, to stretch a point? In addition, we were encoded in the industry. So we worked under the provinces of the FDA. So we built medical devices. And when you build medical devices, not just the manufacturing, but the development happens under the auspices of a code of federal regulations, mean federal law. So when you say a code of federal regulations, you mean a federal law that cannot be violated. So before we pick on the waterfall too hard, I just clipped this the other day from CFR 820.3, Code of Federal Regulations, United States federal law. A documented software requirement specification provides a baseline for both validation and verification. The software validation process cannot be completed without an established software requirement specification. That document has to do all software system inputs, outputs, and functions, all performance requirements, throughput, reliability, accuracy, everything. And you had to be able to trace that thing. So if we have a mindset that we're building an infusion pump that has to behave in a certain way, and we're operating under the auspices of a set of regulations, which, by the way, do not say waterfall development, and they do not say you have to write the requirements first, but the interpretation of the industry was, and more importantly, the interpretation of the FDA auditors was, where's your software requirement specification? How do you know you're coding the right thing? Not that we're going to create one when we're all done and publish it, but you needed to have it. So we did follow these rules, and we built deep process guidance around the fact that we're not going to proceed with the design until we have a reasonable specification and statement of requirements. We're not going to do the coding until we have design complete. We've documented the design. We've reviewed the design. We have notes of the design review in the device record that says, here's what the design was and here's where it was reviewed. It's easy to make fun of that. Let's be honest. We were very successful with that model. And to the extent that systems could be kind of considered from a requirements perspective, you kind of know what an infusion pump has to do. It worked. Did it work as well as other things might? Not necessarily, but we learned from that. We built devices, infusion pumps and medical devices and ventilators and all kinds of things. I spent about 18 years or so in and out of the hospital in a various opportunities, from surgery to recovery to basically just general patient care to incoming and receiving, understanding the way in which people interact with medical devices. I have the unique experience. It was not this infusion pump. My daughter had a head injury. Fortunately, she turned out great, so no concerns there. Went to the hospital in Boulder, Colorado, and lo and behold, she was hooked up to a medical device, an infusion pump, that I had personally written much of the software for. Now, I think you'll be happy to know that I was really happy that I had written the software for that, because I knew how much discipline my team had put into that. And I knew how we had validated, and I knew the brute force mechanisms that we used to prove that every method did its thing, and that infusion pump did exactly what it's supposed to do. And the harder part, and nothing else. It's one thing to have the infusion pump do the right thing. It's another thing to say, and it's not going to do anything ever that isn't that. So it became very personal for me. It also became very serious. And I'll also tell you, I got tired after about 15 or 17 years of worrying about whether or not our software was going to kill anybody. Now, we went through about 18 years and we were never involved in what the FDA calls as an adverse event, which is that there's an injury or death due to a prototype or experimental device. And that was more skill than luck for sure, but there's an element of luck in that too, because when you're experimenting and prototyping, you make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, people's lives are at risk. The point of this is that I take software very, very seriously. And I believe that the reliability of software and the quality of the software is fundamentally the difference maker between systems that work in scale and are human rated and can be deployed at scale and be built at scale, and those that frankly don't deserve to see the light of day. But I also got to do some other interesting things. Imagine building an adventure ride. my company, Rela, we would build anything for anybody. And we had this great opportunity. Let's build an adventure ride. Now, this is interesting. So where's the specs? There's no specs, right? When we talk to the Disney Imagineering people, they say, we want an experience and it's going to look like this. And we started discussing then what has become part of SAFe, fixed versus variable specifications. So if you look in SAFe right now and look under solution intent, the word software requirement doesn't appear there for a reason. Solution intent has fixed versus variable elements. And let me tell you how you reason about that. Here's what was fixed. This adventure ride was going to hold, I believe, 12 people. I actually don't remember. It might have been 16 or so. That was it. It didn't matter if they were big or small. There's only 12 seat belts in there. It had to accelerate at a certain rate and not greater than that. But the question becomes, if there's 12 teenagers or 12-year-olds on the ride, or 12 really hefty adults, the mass on that ride is 3-to-1. Does it have to accelerate at the same rate with 12 large adults as it does with 12 small kids? That's a fixed versus variable assumption. And the answer was no, it does not. Well, why doesn't it? Because if you just create the specification for acceleration for the larger load, you have to beef up the entire system. You have to have more acceleration. You have to have more torque. You need larger hydraulic systems. You needed better actuators. It wasn't worth it. So the reality is, if you take this ride, it does not accelerate at the same rate. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But fixed versus variable intent said 12 riders for sure. However, we can accelerate at a slightly different rate depending upon the load. That's what you start thinking about. Now, between these two worlds, pretty big difference. These are today's worlds. We still build adventure rides and fun things like that. And we still build medical systems. We don't, but you people that is listening do. And the reason I want to leave these slides up here for a second is to remind you that these are unlike things. And a one size fits all that says we're going to do detailed requirement specifications or we're not going to have any at all is never the answer. And the trick about managing solution development, in particular about understanding requirements, is really, really lumpy. This device might have 20 or 30 pages of extremely high reliable specifications as to pumping rate, variation under load, different viscosities in the tubing, et cetera. But it also might have some flexibility. How's the operator going to interact with it? What kind of alarms are you going to put? So we can't take a single approach, waterfall, SAFe, whatever, and say it's going to apply absolutely universally in this case. It has to be tailored to the situation at hand. So we were successful with that business, and we did a lot of good work, and we went on, and I spent 18 years there, and it was fun. It was also really, really hard. I was not an experienced CEO. I remember my mistakes so vividly, more so than the things I did well. I assume I did some things well because I have people with me now. Really, there's people at Skilled Agile that worked with us at Rela, and we were relatively successful at that. And then said we need to get big as well. We want to grow, so we merged with a medical equipment company, and we took the company public. And we used our skills in high assurance systems to build medical devices. In this case, ventilators that were shipped literally around the world, and that was successful. But I started to get worried about the sustainability of the absolutely rigid waterfall thing. Now, this is a daily camera photo. It's pretty embarrassing. It's pretty embarrassing, I admit it, but so be it. That was my file. In those days, you had file photos. This was the one on file at the Boulder Daily Camera, and it showed that I was a medical equipment guy and I was pretty buttoned down. But I started writing and opining on how the strictures that we were putting around the software development process, even in the medical device industry, were not going to be effective. They did not deal with the latest state-of-the-art approaches where we had object orientation, where we could model elements of the system, and we could ascribe responsibilities to certain elements, and we could test those elements as an element of the system. So I started thinking and worrying even then about the fact that this model might not scale over time. Well, I eventually left that business after 18 years. I recently did a life map we're doing a leading by example in-house training right now. And it was not a pleasant exit. It's just a fact. I got tossed out of that company to be fair. And that was probably the right thing for me and the right thing for them at the moment. But being that I'd been successful as an entrepreneur, I decided to go again. So I met a guy that used to work at Sybase. He was a good database developer with some UI skills, and we built Requisite Pro. So after 3 or 4 years of trying to figure out ways in which we could identify how to express requirements so that they could be testable, we had to build a solution that did that. So I remember the byline was, the power of a database and the simplicity of Word. So we built that solution as a means to start capturing requirements, still very much kind of front end and waterfall like. But what happened after that? We sold that business. So Rational Software came along and swooped us up. Rational was built by acquisition through the 90s or so. Started out as an ADA company, basically an ADA compiler company. Acquired companies like us. They acquired a company called Pura. They acquired Atria, which became ClearCase. They acquired SQA Associates. And we built a suite of products. And then I was put in a situation where I could start opining about a slightly different look. And that different look is, wow, this use case is a really expressive way to understand the behavior of a system. And it's not some abstract, the system shall. No, it's in this use case, the user does this, the system does this. That was a very powerful breakthrough in terms of thinking about expressing system behavior. So I was with a group of thought leaders. Ed Jordan was kind of my coach. And I took kind of the first blast out there to say, let's try to do this a little bit differently. Let's take a use case approach to defining and managing software requirements. And that book sold some copies. Surprisingly, it still sells today. So be careful about your code in your books out there, because sometimes you're going to have to go back 20 some years and go, did I really say that? Sometimes you're going to be impressed by what you thought. And sometimes you're going to be, I'm pretty sure I didn't write that. I think they must have edited that after I wrote the book. I would have never said that. And that's the trick of being an author. For those of you who've done this, this is a large batch process. It goes out, you can't recall it. So your words are fixed over time. When I joined Rational, the company came to me basically right at the closing celebration. And they said, the VP, John Lovett, asked me, he said, well, what do you want to do at Rational? And I said, well, I'm pretty sure you want me to run my old business inside your company. And John said, we're pretty sure you don't want to do that. And they couldn't have, they couldn't have been more correct. The last thing I wanted to do was roll into Rational as an entrepreneur and run my small business in the context of their business. Now, I still, as a business unit owner, I still own that. But I said, I think what's really interesting is I think the work that you're doing in modeling, systems are getting more and more complex, and the work that you're doing in process, this objective thing is very interesting. And if we think about the three things we need to help, the three things we need to provide to help software developers, there's people, process, and tools. People are number one, and that's the value of the manifesto for sure. But the people are largely given. If we go into an enterprise for a safe transformation, we don't say, let's start with new people. That'd be horrific. That would be, that'd be awful. That'd be inhumane. We're going to use the people we have, right? But we can probably change the process, and we can also tool. So if you think about this, there's people on the left doing all the work, and here's the process, and here's modeling. And one of the things I learned in that process by working with these three guys, so nobody manages these methodologists, the three amigos, right? It turns out they were in my department budget, but management was not a thing you could do. You couldn't manage any of them. We just met last week. Grady and Ivar and I did a little video sponsored by Ken France of C Prime. And we laughed about the fact that, you can't manage a methodologist, it's impossible, but you can lead. What I learned there when I saw these people debate and come to conclusions, I remember the grandest debate was what icon they were going to use to represent a class. And I think Grady wanted to use a cloud, which seemed really cool at the time. But somebody else wanted to use a rectangle. I don't know how it worked out. But the UML and the process was born with conceptual integrity. So it didn't matter that Grady and Ivar didn't agree initially. It mattered that eventually they would agree. And if you see that model, you see that model in SAFE now, right? There's a small group of people with me as the lead of that process who come to agreement via peer review on the decisions that we make. And this goes right back to Frederick Brooks, who said, look, when you're building a system of complexity, conceptual integrity dictates that the design must proceed from one mind or from a very small number of agreeing resonant minds. Now, there are new models for that, right? There's open source as well. Even then, there's always kind of a chair of governance on the open source model. And we promoted the rational unified process. Now, today, people go, oh, that was a terrible idea. I mean, what was that? That whole RUP thing. It's like it was big, it was heavyweight. It was kind of big, and we did really help people building really big systems. But I ask you to look at this a second. And if you ignore the labels up top, which I think kind of hurt, inception, elaboration, construction, transition, and you look at what we're communicating here. Hey, Daz, I'm going to have you go off of mute for a second and say, what does it say?
We're building a lot of this stuff incrementally throughout the whole process.
Yeah, and what it says early on, where do you spend most of your time?
In modeling and requirements.
Okay. Yeah. And later on, do you still work on requirements after transition?
Of course you do.
Absolutely. And we do this in iterations. So I guess it's fun to make fun of the things that came before. I mean, certainly those old turboprop airplanes look pretty archaic in perspective. But the reality is this was the first codification of the fact that you can't do this in just one pass. And there is no such thing as, a front end and design and test, et cetera. It's a continuous process, and you have to hit all of these all the time. So I'm very proud of the work that we did there and the fact that we helped pioneer thousands of companies moving away from the rigid waterfall, iterative incremental. But then I left Rational, and I thought maybe at the time, maybe it's a good time to retire. Okay, so let's try this for a while. So I tried golf. Here I am literally at the old course at St. Andrews. You see in the lower right-hand corner here, the golf ball is not between me and the green, okay? There's something very wrong with that picture. So I pretended to retire. It was not even close. People have asked me, even just this last week or so, they said, what are you gonna be doing in 10 years? And I said, it depends on how I'm feeling, but I hope to be doing that. So retirement did not work for me. And that was a really good lesson. The only time in my life that I found myself unhappy was my attempt to be happy during retirement. So the lesson learned for me there is that's not what I am. That's not what I do. And I need to keep working. So I left Rational. I love that company, by the way. The people I worked with are just some of the best, and some are with us now, even at Scaled Agile. We've got people from Rally and Requisite and Rational all working with us now. But so retirement didn't work for me. So I decided at one point, I talked to my wife, Becky, and I said, I think I'm unhappy. Can I go back to work? And she said, you idiot. What? How did you ever think you were going to sit in an easy chair or go hit 7 irons all day and be happy? It does not make me happy. Now, I got to say, I love golf, by the way. It's still my hobby. So my life goes, family, work, and golf for sure. But it didn't work for me. So consequently, I didn't retire then. I'm not retired now. I have no current plans to retire, much to the chagrin of some of the others that I work with, I'm sure. Now, all of a sudden it's 2001, and boom, I'm unfettered by previous notions. I don't have any allegiance to Waterfall, no allegiance to Rational. I was not invited to the Agile Manifesto birth. Grady was invited. He couldn't go. Ivar was invited. I was not invited. I didn't really have a brand that I don't know why they would have invited me. I don't know if I would have been smart enough to go if I did. But this was born in 2001, and I was fascinated by it. So I started doing a little independent research, and I started to use this tool with various companies. And I reached out to Kent Beck and got his ideas. I talked to Jeff Sutherland. I went back to there's a really interesting article called The New Product Development Game, which is the birth of Scrum. And I started studying the theory of operation of Agile, where it came from, okay? And then I used that, and it was really cool. So I got involved in a half a dozen companies. I was with Cornerstone Venture Capital at the time, and also doing some personal investing. And I used my newfound skills. I took Ken Schwaber's Scrum class. I learned XP first. I actually learned extreme programming first. I still have a bias towards XP because of the incredible accuracy and quality that's created by writing the test first and peer review. If you go back to my medical background and you say it's really important that all the software works, okay, it is really important that the software works. How do we know it works? Well, extreme programming did that. So I got to coach these companies, and they're interesting companies like Ping Identity, which just went public a year and a half ago, Roving Planet, which we sold to 3Com, Sage Circle, which basically didn't get much done, One Realm, which we sold, and Pelion Systems. And Pelion Systems is an interesting story because Pelion Systems was a lean manufacturing MRP company. Dave Gleditch was one of the foremost thinkers in lean manufacturing. So they built a software system to help people do their work and help manufacturers. We were trying to restore the vitality of manufacturing in the US. And that was really our mission is all these jobs going to go overseas? We believe that with lean manufacturing, they wouldn't all have to. Now, over time, the inexorable cost differences, the inexorable supply chain collapse, the emergence of companies like Foxcons, et cetera, which are cities. This is not a plant, this is a city. It's still true that we don't manufacture much here, but we tried. And we certainly tried to develop the methods and practices that allow manufacturers to succeed. By a stroke of luck, one of the companies was out looking for money and help was Rally Software. And I met Ryan Martins really early on, and he described an IDE for Agile development, and he showed me how they're developing it. And he said, and I said, I think we need more of a tool than an IDE. I think we have IDEs. We really need to make a tool that works. So I joined Rally as basically their methodologist and kind of early thought leader, and started helping them build the tools that we use to scale Agile. We took that to market. And I took Rally as a company and my peeps there, the people that are still my friends, into larger companies like BMC Corporation and Computer Associates at the time, and TradeStation Securities. BMC Corporation story is an interesting one for Agile when it comes to the manifesto. So what is Agile for me? It's a cross-functional team of 5, 10, 12 individuals that learn how to work together and build solutions in a short time box. That is the most dynamic model I'd ever seen. Whatever you say about RUP, we did not have a definition of a team in there, and we didn't express, if we understood, the real dynamic of what it's like when you believe in the manifesto and you put small teams together and you empower them to do the work. Now, I wanted to go to BMC Corporation and apply the skills because I was asked by Israel Gott if Agile would work at scale. I did some research. There was no record, no knowledge about Agile working at scale. And I said, Israel, I don't know. I have no way to tell you if this thing's going to work at scale or not. But I said, is it possible at BMC Corporation to rethink the organization to create high-performing teams, Agile teams that had cross-functional skills they needed to perform? Can we create high-performing teams at BMC? Somewhat in jest and somewhat not, he said, I'm going to have to check with HR. That was not the model, right? We were functionally oriented. The organizations were organized around function, not by cross-functional teams. So little by little, we learned how to scale that. We discovered that architecture still matters. Duh. When I went down and dirty with Agile, I didn't bring architecture with me, but within 6 to 8 months in every one of these companies, an intentional view of architecture had to be there. A component of a system by its own definition cannot know the context, cannot know the full context of the system. If it did, it would be the system, not a component. How do the components work together? Features, whatever you want to call them. They work together in the context of a system. So architecture had to go back into Agile. And I expressed that in Scaling Software Agility. I wrote the book too soon. It was basically some years before its time. Then I started reflecting at about that time and said, what an incredible body of knowledge we have. We have Lean. So I kind of grew up with Lean. I learned Lean first. We have Agile development, lots of bright thinkers there. We have the DevOps industry and a movement. Some of the sharpest people now are working in the DevOps space, which is basically extreme programming, continuous integration, all the way into production on steroids. And we have systems thinking. And we learned so much from Gemba Some we just have to invent. So I started inventing, and the little kid got out his PowerPoint and he made some really ugly diagrams. And he made him some simple rules like features fit in releases. Why? Because if they don't, you can't, you have half a feature available with the release boundary. And we release more frequently, 4 times a year instead of annually. And I started blogging about that. And I started blogging basically when WordPress was invented, because before that it was beyond my patience with development skills to be able to develop programming at that point. And I expressed that then in Agile Software Requirements. This is a book that Daz found. Now, this book was written in 2011. It's 2021, last I looked. So this book is now 10 years old. And if I wrote it again, I wouldn't write this book. I'd write something slightly different. However, that is the nature of science. You know enough to move the science forward, you write it down. I met Reinertsen during that time. He caused me to rethink everything. As a matter of fact, when I read his book, I had to rewrite my book before I went to the publisher. I was so mad at him that I learned so much that I had to rewrite it. I made him do the foreword for it. And he said, okay, great, send me a hard copy of the book. Okay, so a weekend later, Kinko's, he has the book and away we go. This is still a very solid book. There's a lot of good advice in here. It isn't perfect because we've learned a lot in the meantime. Given that book, I was approached by some people that said, let's start a company. And I said, nope, not gonna do it. I'm done. I've been a CEO for 30 some years and I'm not gonna start a company. And I said, if we ever did it, 2 things are gonna happen. Number one, I will not be the CEO. Okay, I failed in that mission until recently. And number 2, what we learn, we're going to make available to the market for free. And we're going to learn from these other experts, and we're going to learn from the industry, and we're going to synthesize it, distill it, and we'll reflect it, and we're going to make it free. So the intellectual property that we've learned from the market is going to be returned to the market in a way that they can consume it without paying $1. That rule is still true. The intellectual property that's in SAFE, the things we know are in SAFE are available to you. You don't have to pay us or a partner to use it. It's still free. And away we go. In 2002, we were raising money for Rally, and we were hanging out with some pretty smart VCs, tech VCs, and they said, I think this Agile thing is just kind of it's just a weird little trend. It's just going to go away. It's just, let's just flash in the pan. It's not really going to change the world. It's just a method. Are you really going to build a company around a method? You got to be crazy. A tool around a single method? Like many of you, when you learn Agile, there's no going back. And I was personally convinced, and convinced to this day, that this is a better way of working. Until we find one that's even better than this, we all have to go here. Now, as an entrepreneur, I'm a huge fan of Jeffrey Moore and lots of business books. I've always read, in the old times, Business Week and IEEE Times. Neither of those magazines are around anymore, I don't think. Maybe they are, I don't really know. So I've always had these 2 halves of me. One's an entrepreneur and one is a technologist. So we hit the chasm and away we went. And we eventually found the tornado. So Darren and Etienne, you found us at about tornado time. You were our tornado. You were some of the brightest people in the field doing the hard work, the pointy end of the stick, where real customers had real problems. And you said, we can use this and we can grow and we can help change the world. And I've sat through a number of sessions with you folks and to understand your mission and purpose. And it's the same as mine. We believe we can improve the lives of the people who build the world's most important systems and thereby improve the lives of the billions of people, literally billions of people that use those world's most important systems. We grew our company and then we started behaving weirdly. And we had to embed the manifesto back in the course because we assumed it. Be careful what you assume. This manifesto is still really hard, and the value system, absolutely agree. But it's really easy to say, well, we only care about the thing on the left, or we only care about the thing on the right, or whatever. But the principles, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. My own company wasn't welcome changing requirements late in development. Deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. Our own company is going, oh, wait a minute, this is too frequent. We're updating the framework too often. Business people and developers must work together daily. That's what product owners and business owners do. There's nothing here that isn't absolutely relevant today. And when we do this exercise in class, what we discovered that this is more important now than it was in 2001. Now, there are some funny words in here, like projects, for example, and working software rather than working systems. So what? 20 years ago? It's sheer genius. I mean, I don't know how it is that we find this thing and still can build on it, but we build on it. At one point, as we scaled, I got frustrated with our own company because as we grew, we hired new people. Well, did they have an Agile background? Not necessarily. Did they believe in these same things? Did they welcome changing requirements? Did they agree that the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams? Well, it turns out not necessarily. Why would they? They didn't grow up in Agile. And at one point I said, enough. There are only 2 posters in our training center, which is empty right now, a lot like this, which is why I had this picture taken. One is the big picture. Actually, sorry. One is the principles, the big pictures over on the side, and the second is the Agile Manifesto. And the reason is, this is what Agile teams do. This is what created the industry, and it's still here. So yeah, it's historical. It's 20 years old. I don't know how they pulled off that feat, but I couldn't be happier that they did it. And we're going to continue to leverage that. Now, how do we leverage that? Well, we put it to work, right? And deliver software frequently from a couple of months to a couple of weeks with a preference for the shorter time scale. That's what we did. I remember at about version 2 or so, maybe version 3, a thought leader came up to me and said, you know, the most interesting you've done with SAFe is to version it. And I actually didn't understand what he meant. And what he meant was you've continued to evolve it. And we do continue to evolve it. There's no question about that. We have a team of dedicated people arguing every day about single words and single phrases and expressions and whether the experience we have is really going to scale or not, that continue to build the framework. And we've achieved a degree of success with that. Our partners, folks here on this phone, have trained over 700,000 people in 110 countries. Over 20,000 enterprises use SAFe to some extent. Some companies like FedEx and Amex and elements in the US Air Force are absolutely all in on SAFe. It is their way of working. The reason they do it is not because of our marketing, which is pretty good now, by the way, but when we started, we didn't have marketing at all. The reason we do it is that Agile works, and Agile works at scale. So we happen to have a framework that reflects how to do that and how to make it work at scale. But SAFe works because Agile works. And SAFe works because it preserves enough agility and provides the governance around architecture and financial guidance and funding, et cetera, to make sure that you're building the right thing. So far, so good. That brings us to today, almost. I got this in my email the other day just for kind of fun. It's like, okay, that's probably me. Now, by the way, I don't wear glasses anymore because I went in and had both my lenses replaced. So I have like amazing vision now. I have the vision of a 20-year-old. I have these new crystal lenses, got rid of my cataracts. I'm crystal clear anymore. So, but that's the one they had to work with. And as of today, surprise, no surprise, as of this very moment, as of this time, we have released just today the latest version of SAFe 5 upgrade. And we've made a change that you should be aware of. We're taking 4.6 off the market. We did not branch the code at all. We have replaced, written over, the methods and practices that you were using in SAFe 5 are gone and they've been replaced. So we are not branching anymore. We're staying right now in this one trunk revision, and our intent is to update it more frequently, not less. Smaller changes, less delta, easier to digest, make it easier for people to adopt SAFe and to keep up. So we have not slowed down the process. And you can go to the framework today and read the what's new and figure out, you know, the new things on there. Some of the things that I'm most excited about is we've created operational value streams as first-class citizens in SAFe. And that means that the development value streams now know who their customer is, and we're directly related to that. We've smoothed out some of the continuous delivery elements here to make sure that people don't walk away and say that big fat yellow bar, we're going to release then. We release on demand. We release on demand. We release basically new content every day, and we expect that you do too. So what's next? I have no ability to predict the future. I think the people are either absolutely brilliant or they're charlatans, and I never know for sure which it is, and you can't tell until you get the future and find out. What I do know is that the challenge of building really big, really important software, digital systems is as great as it's ever been. The learnings are probably faster than it's ever been. So while I can't say what's in the next version of SAFe yet, or version 7 or version 8, what I can say is that the pace of change continues and is actually accelerating. So what we're going to do is stay committed to our Agile principles, our Lean principles, which we had to use both, right? I couldn't get to a portfolio consideration without understanding value streams and Lean thinking. I couldn't get to a full end-to-end mapping of how to deliver software to the market without understanding that DevOps is an element of the value stream. So Lean and Agile come together. So it's a Lean Agile framework. And indeed, you see, I think in work like for Mick Kirsten, a return to those fundamentals around what Lean means and what value stream management means and how we're going to measure that. So the pace of change is unabated. We're not tired. We catch our next breath, and retirement didn't work for me at all anyway. So with that, that's my discussion and my one-way dialogue. And I look very much forward to questions, because questions are a lot more fun than staring at my own screen and speaking to this monitor. So Darren,
Dean, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Fascinating tour of your career and your fashion statements over the years as well. I really enjoyed that as well.
I'm a fashion maven. My wife would tell you.
I'm going to pick up the first question as well, because it's a question that I know that traveled lots of organizations. There's one question that I get asked so many times. I'm going to pick it up from Matthew as well. Often transformations to Lean, Agile, SAFe, etc. are driven by engineers, and they struggle to get business leadership to buy into the change, the behaviors of the entire organization. How do we get this revolution in business leadership for organization like we had in manufacturing? It feels like a battle. Do you think we're still in the early phase of adoption, so this slow uptake is to be expected, or do you think there's still something fundamental to get business leaders to take note?
So that's a fair question, and it really lays to the history of the company. The first course that we wrote when we built the framework, the first thing we ever sold was Leading Safe. And Leading Safe is not designed for a developer and an Agile team. He honestly doesn't need it. He's not really concerned about queuing theory necessarily. The batch size is not under his control. He may or may not be a systems thinker. We hope that he or she is. But those are not their concerns. Their concern is how I get this code tested and into production as quickly as possible. But based upon some of my experiences of trying to scale, particularly Scrum at scale, to the tune of a few thousand people and largely failing. Did Scrum fail? No. Did we fail? Did the enterprise fail? I think we did. One of the takeaways was the fact that you can't do this without leadership. You can't do it without management. And you can't do it without the structures that these organizations create to build the hierarchies that can employ people and can pay people and keep them operating legal. So the borderline that we hit was when that same enterprise where we had failed came back to me and said, would you guys try it in this other division? And we said, I don't see why we would, because it didn't work. We went away and had an offsite and said, what did we do? And we said, we made the dumbest mistake of all time. We taught developers a way of working that their managers didn't understand or even support. That's like, in hindsight, like the dumbest thing we ever did. Let's take 3,000 developers and teach them something their managers don't understand, and we won't even let them in the room. They're not even supposed to go to the daily stand-up meeting because they're going to muck it all up. Big mistake. So Leading Safe is designed for that. Now, how do you get to Leading Safe? There's two ways. You either need proactive leadership that understands we need to make this change, and this is the best way of working that we can find, and we're going to try it. We're going to train ourselves in Leading Safe. Or you're at an existential crisis where you have no choice but to change. What the world is discovering, and why I have hope that we're going to break through this barrier and get all leaders on board, is that if you're not really, really good at large-scale software development, whether you're Cisco with a C or Cisco with an S, you are absolutely threatened by those that are. So as Mick Kirsten pointed out in his book, the economics, right? The economic outcomes in this century are going to be driven by people that are really good at large scale software development. So we're getting there, but it's still a company by company, you know, executive by executive, you know, pick away, chip away, get them to understand that this is not just a thing for tech. Business agility is a better label. That's helped us a lot because people want to achieve that. Outcomes focused, not output focused, has helped us a lot. Adding KPIs to the value stream. So we're getting there. But we're basically training a generation of people, my age and younger, that grew up on a different model, and they were very successful with that model. And they have what's called the expertise paradox. I'm a SVP at American Express. I helped build this company. Yes, that's amazing. Brilliant what you did. But is what you did to get here what happens next, or whatever your company is? Pick your own company. And the answer is no, that has to evolve. Our leadership styles have to change. We have to understand, we have to be lean thinking manager teachers, to use Toyota's word. And that a lot of that work is still in front of us. And yet, I think we'd all be discouraged, Daz and Etienne, if we hadn't seen so many successes. At the same time, we're banging our head in one company, we go to the other company. And I remember one CIO who was approaching PI planning, and his people weren't ready. And they're freaked out. We're going to have 100 people together. It's going to be massively embarrassing. We don't really have our backlog. And their leader, the CIO, said, "Now look, we're all going to get together for 2 days, and we're going to figure out what we're going to build next." What's wrong with that? What can possibly go wrong if we get together and talk about how to build a system? So there was a lean thinking manager teacher says, "I trust you folks. I'm not sure what we're going to get done in 2 days, but I'm confident that we're going to have a really good outcome." So we do see the examples. We see examples on both sides. And over time, my personal belief is we all got to go. This is a better way of working. This is the best way of working that we have. It will be that way until it's replaced by an even better way of working. We'll be on guard for that. We'll try to make sure we understand what that is. But this is where we have to go, and the executives need to go with us, and we need to coach them, cajole, have empathy for their role, have respect for their accomplishments, and yet still engage them in a process of saying, this is going to change.
Thank you. A very simple question from Peter, and I'm going to add an appendix to it as well. How did you come up with the train moniker? And I'm going to ask, and why a release train engineer?
So we came up with the train because the first thing we discovered when we were at companies like BMC Corporation and CA was in the database tools group. BMC Corporation was building their infrastructure application management, is that as cool as an Agile team is, they can only create a portion of a system. These are big systems. I mean, how much can 8 men and women build? And then we realized that to have a system work, it requires intentionality of architecture, and that people need to be aligned on what they do for the system. So you can't create 8 siloed teams to work independently and pretend like a system's going to emerge. It will not. If it does, it'll emerge like an alligator from the swamp. It'll emerge and bite you right in the rear. So that model has to be intentional, and the cooperation has to be intentional. The train metaphor basically came up from the standpoint that if we could add cadence, this is cadence and synchronization, right? If we would know when new stuff is getting on the train, let's say there's a PI boundary and stuff gets on the train and the train leaves. Well, now I can't put new stuff on that train anymore. It's already left. So at some point, the train metaphor started to evolve to say, well, we need to have reliable deliveries and a reliable cadence. We need to know when a batch of works leaves and when it arrives. And the PI boundary was that. Now that became fixed in a lot of people's mind in a way that we had never intended, but it did also focus them on much nearer term. Why the release train engineers? We came up with the release train, and we said, who's going to help? There's 3 key roles in SAFe. So when I went into an enterprise to do these transformations before it was SAFe, I was looking for 3 people. Who understands the way the system needs to work? That's a system architect, okay? Who knows what it's supposed to do? That's going to be some product manager, product or business analyst. And by the way, who here knows how to get things done in the company? Well, the people that knew how to get things done were project and program managers. But the model they used to do that was a traditional model. If everything is in silos, you have to have project managers stitch all the work together. When you eliminated the silos, you didn't eliminate the need to facilitate the process. It's really an RTE is really an agile program manager, but every program manager thinks they're agile. So we took a chance and we said, we're going to create a unique term there that's uniquely associated with this different role. And most RTEs have a strong PMO background. They've learned agile. I have a great respect for people that understand how to get things done. So the RTE came after the train, and the train was just about cadence and synchronization and becoming more reliable, right? If we know, if I'm planning in, let's say 8-week PIs, and I'm a business owner and my stuff doesn't get on there because I didn't get through I didn't win the debate on priority, I now know what my waiting time is. I'm going to wait 8 weeks and I'm going to get my stuff on there. So now I have predictive delivery. 16 weeks from now, I can deliver this. If my thing is the next most important thing on the next boundary, in 16 weeks, we'll be able to deliver that. So it was cadence and synchronization that drove the train thought. And it was the fear of traditional project management kind of overriding the empowerment of the dozen or so teams that we put together on the train that caused us to create that funny little guy with a hat, the release train engineer.
Fantastic.
And like product owner and scrum master, right? Does a product owner own the product? No. Does the scrum master, a master of scrum, after taking a class? No. Every word in the space is overloaded. Sometimes you just pick. You have to add a definition to the word. That's what science is. You got to have a taxonomy of that. And we happened to pick RTE. And we kept product owner and scrum master because they were such critical roles. The water was under the dam. We saw other models of, iteration managers and other labels for that. But we just said, hey, Scrum works. I like Scrum. My team runs a very, very much a Scrum-like process, more of a hybrid with really Scrum XP Kanban. But we have those roles. Those are important roles. My team has a Scrum master and a product owner. So we just used it because it worked.
Yeah. Two questions on leadership. Raghav Mita saying, thanks for the excellent talk. My question is that, do you have any plan to include update change management for leadership like behavior change? And Thomas Hansen is saying, as an SPC, I really need help on leadership via training. Could we have some more on this training and supporting mindset growth?
We do. So I'm actually taking right now the first module in our new leadership offering, and it's called Leading by Example. And I just finished my life map that's part of the mapping of that. So we have prototyped the first module of our leadership series. One of those modules that's yet to come is Leading Change. And we're working with Cotter's organization because they've got a lot of content on what they call change leadership. Another one of those is organizing around value. So if I can lead by example, and I could lead change, and I could lead to organizing around value, that's what I think the executives that we're working with need. That's what we owe them. So very much in process. Now, don't let that be an excuse for not getting people in leading safe, because the probability of success in large enterprise is directly proportional to how many leaders took leading safe and paid attention. So you always want to do that. But beyond that, how do behaviors need to change? What's a lean thinking manager do different? What do their words sound like? How do they see WIP? Do they see cues? Do they understand demand versus capacity? Do they even know the taxonomy they're using? When you say epic, does their brain freeze, or do they know exactly what the model is? So our voice of the customer, our market has told us that this is still the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge, and we need to address that with more content, and we're doing that now.
And Dean, again, another question that we often get asked is, what's your view on organizations that adopt partial or customized SAFe?
SAFe is a framework. You have to do what works. Here's my experience. I've never yet had a case where I've gone in and somebody say, we've customized SAFe. Maybe there's one or two exceptions to that. I saw a solution train, without calling it that, the other day. It was actually pretty smart because there were certain politics around the solution train and the roles they didn't want to do. Most of the time, they've made SAFe work more like they worked before. SAFe is a system, and it's not a small system. So here's the downside to SAFe. You kind of have to do it. You have to do at least the essential stuff. You have to have business owners. You have to have DevOps. You have to have backlogs. You have to have Scrum, XP, and Kanban. You have to do the system demos every 2 weeks. You've got to do that stuff. So if you do that and you don't do the system demo, or you don't do inspect and adapt, or many organizations, especially the IT shops, struggle with the product owner role. Well, we don't have that. We have a business analyst, and he's supporting 5 teams. Darren, you know that's not going to work. So I used to be more flexible than I am now, honestly. I'm not ideological. I'm passionate about what I do, but I'm not ideological. There's something wrong with SAFe, we'll fix it. And the critics have helped us with that. So we weren't received necessarily with open arms in the Agile community, but we learned from them. And a lot of the things they said were correct or were correct, and some weren't so much. But we're committed, right, to making sure that SAFe is right. And when I go into enterprises that are struggling, I usually find they're not doing it. I went into an enterprise that was pretty good, and yet the velocity just didn't look right. And I started sorting through it, and I said, "Tell me about this team." And they fired up Rally, and they said, "Ooh, we got all the stats on the team." So what do they do? They write all this code. They're a really great team. What's this other team do? Oh, that's a testing team. They're really good in that domain. They test all the stuff this other team does. And I said, that's going to make it really hard to do integration. So at the system demo time, nothing's going to be working. They say, well, we were never really able to get together all the resources we needed to integrate and do the system demo. I said, well, then when you do PI planning and inspect and adapt, it's going to be really painful to look back and realize you hadn't done those things. They said, well, our management wasn't supportive of that ceremony, so we don't do that. So the teams aren't cross-functional, right? There's no system demos, there's no forced integration, and there's no inspect and adapt to close the loop. Are we surprised that they were struggling? No. It's amazing they got done what they did by using as much of SAFe as they did. SAFe is a system. Basically, you got to do most of it.
And I promise, Lean, I did not ask this question. This question is from Frank, and he's a real person, not me. He said, even though you're diminishing the term program, you still have program backlog in there.
Now, Darren, is this your cousin, Frank? Okay, so here's the evolution. Let's be completely honest here. When we started SAFe in 2008 at BMC Corporation, they were shipping annually. And we've converted them to quarterly shipment. We actually called it a potentially shippable increment because we weren't even sure they'd be able to ship quarterly. So the reality is we did absolutely rally people around that deliverable, that program increment. Over time, of course, we moved to a continuous delivery model, and the word program starts to have some negative impacts associated with it. But if you look now at the big picture, you'll see the planning intervals of PI, and we have dramatically reduced the visual emphasis we put on the boundary, because the boundary is a planning boundary, right? It's a planning and inspect adapt boundary. It's not a shipping boundary. We were not able to change the program backlog to ART backlog in this release. And the reason is that it's a big system. We have courses and exams. A lot of those are being in the process of being translated. And that's such a significant change to SAFe that we weren't able to accomplish it in this release. So what we decided to do is take a small bite, basically rename the program increment to PI, de-emphasize the boundary except for planning purposes, and move forward as quickly as we could. I will also say the program is not a bad word everywhere, Darren. It may be where you and Frank live, but we work with a lot of people that actually think that way, and they think about, well, this is a big program. We got to get this satellite launched, and they don't think about the continuous delivery model of saying, well, really, what I do is I want to launch a satellite every day, or no, I want to put new software on that satellite every day. So it's the world is not converged on whether or not program is a bad or a good thing. But what we're converged on is that if you use the program in the sense of a series of projects, then you start off in a bad place because it implies there's a start and an end. And that's just not the truth with continuous delivery. And as you move from project to product, which is one of the main things that happened in version 5, you start to eliminate those boundaries. So we're getting there as fast as we can, consistent with what we can actually do within the framework and keep up, and also consistent with making sure our customers can come along for the ride.
Excellent. Etienne, you've got some questions you want to pick up on?
Yeah, the first question of Hiron. Could you please explain enterprise agility versus business agility with the focal lens of SAFe and Agile Manifesto?
So all the labels, especially at this level, are so overloaded they become meaningless, okay? We define business agility very specifically. We don't believe that the FedEx truck drivers should necessarily have a daily stand-up every day, and that we have the guidance about how they should plan their work. That's not what we do. We define business agility as the ability to compete in the digital age with technology-enabled solutions. That's it. So we're not helping large nonprofit organizations figure out how to roll out their new courseware. Let's say for one company we work with does training for English as second language users. We don't know how to distribute that. If they want to think about how to develop better courseware, we could go there. So for us, business agility is the ability to compete in the digital age. We ascribe that to a portfolio because we only have the domain of building solutions, right? We don't have operating people. They're not in our budget. You know, we're geeks. We're people that help other people build the systems. We don't opine on you should run marketing this way. We have some ideas that might want to be more agile. We don't tell them how to, you know, whether or not they should, what they're going to do with this rent problem that they have now that they're not going back to work. That's not our world. So if I would infer from that, that business agility for us is a portfolio that's very adept at tracking to the market, then an enterprise that has that probably has enterprise agility, but we don't have a definition of that. And there's also the term enterprise business agility out there, which that's more of everything. So we have to be careful with our terms. We're a taxonomy. So for us, we say what a thing means. And if you go click on business agility, it's going to tell you what we mean by that. If you click on solution, it's going to tell you what we mean by that. So we have to be semantically consistent with ourselves so that the system works together. And no word is perfect, right? Capability is overloaded. There's business capabilities. We have capabilities in large solutions. There's no perfect taxonomy. There's no domain in which we could just pick all new words and have people understand it. So we had to work with the words that we have and invent phrases like release on demand to more specifically call out the fact that the release is continuous.
I'm conscious of the time as we draw close to that bewitching hour of half past the hour as well. So many questions, Dean. It's been a fascinating insight over your career over the last 50 years or so. I suppose just for me, if you look back, any regrets or think you would change? And as we look forward, any hopes or aspirations?
Yeah, I hope to be a better leader. I mean, I think, you know what it's like. You do something well as a lean agile leader and it's expected. When you screw up, it's a scar. So I look at my career now and I see my mistakes more clearly than ever. I'm frustrated by them. I wish I could go back and correct those things. I can't. Those are how I learned. Some of those ways I learned didn't just hurt me, they hurt others in terms of, you know, reorganizations, et cetera. So I'm, you know, haunted by my mistakes. And I think that for each of us to learn how to be better leaders is the ultimate gift. And that's why I'm taking the same course too. I think I can be a better leader. I think I can be more empowering. I think I can, I'm pretty motivational. I think it can be motivational in a way that doesn't intimidate people necessarily and get people working together. So for me, what's going forward is to improve my skills, because if I can improve my skills as a leader, I can develop other leaders and they can take this charter forward.
Dean Leffingwell, thank you so much for taking time to share with us your journey. Been a real privilege, been a real pleasure. Thank you to everyone that has attended today. It's been I've been overwhelmed by the response for this meetup as well. To everyone, have a great rest of your day, or if you're in the Far East, then enjoy your morning as well. Dean Leffingwell, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in the field.